So this is the third tutorial for the Impasto Brush Pack, and moving into this tutorial, you have to actually already know how to do the dual color loading. If you haven't, you can just watch the first tutorial, and you also should know how to match colors and gradually change colors and manipulate the contrast of your impasto, which you can learn in the second tutorial. So today we will actually be going into using a lot of stems like this, and also we will be painting with it. And then the exciting thing is we will be learning how to use the 3D smudge to extend your strokes. So if you remember from the second tutorial, I actually talked about impasto being solid color blocks instead of gradients. So we are actually going to use that a lot today. So that is the first rule of the tutorial today. So for example, this is the project file that we'll be using today, and this is the base painting, and we will be painting on top of this painting. When we talk about solid colors, we are actually talking about putting blobs like this of a single color. So everything is a single color, and then there is no gradient. So we actually have to match the shape of whatever is underneath it, because if you paint it too big, it's going to cover up and then it will disrupt the entire value control of the painting. Like if you see here, there's actually like a gradient. So when we put the impasto, if you put it like that, we lose the gradient. So when you use impasto, make sure to put it in a position that you're not disrupting the tonal values of whatever is underneath it. And this applies for the base painting that I created or that you have created. And the second rule of my impasto brushes is that you do not use it to paint. So you don't use it to sketch or paint and try to create something that makes sense with it. They are all just effects, like you add them at the end of your project, and you do not use them to create a project, because Procreate doesn't really have the engine for you to paint freely with such brushes. So we can only use them to embellish our projects. So there are 3 rules already that I've talked about. So the first rule is to treat all the impasto as solid blocks and not gradients. And also the second rule is don't lose control of the values and the gradients that are already underneath. And the third rule is never use your impasto brushes to paint. So if you open up the project, you will see something like this. Just turn off the sample impasto. If you want to, you can refer to it. And if you expand the base painting, so you can see here it's all labeled with numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It means that when I create the base layer, I started out with 1 first for the sketch, and then I did 2, then 3, and then 4, and then 5. And this is how I created the base painting. I just set up a reference of the image here because I've forgotten what I did already. It's been some time. Okay, now let's talk about the brushes here. As you all know, I have 2 sets of impasto thick paint, right? We have the D and then the L. So the D we paint with the shadow, and then for the L we paint with the blue. So why did I create 2 different sets of brushes? So the reason is, when we paint, we tend to change the main color a lot. If you did the second tutorial, you would know how difficult it is to keep changing both the shadow and the main color all the time. So I wanted an option where I just change the main color. So let's say right now I have dark blue as my shadow color, right? So if I'm using the light brush, I paint with the light color, and I can just change to any blue and it will still work because the shadow is blue. I can basically use anything blue under the sun for the main color. I can even push it to slightly green and it will still work. So this is a quick way for you to change main colors quickly. If you want to, you can just use the L brushes. But then why is majority of my brushes in the D category? So the main reason is that the D brushes actually do look a lot better. When I've created them, I always try to get them to be in the L category, and then they always fail, so I just push them to be the D category. So that is the reason why. So this is the first tip of how to save time in your workflow. If you find that you're spending a lot of time in in your color picking, you can always just switch to the L brushes to save time. There is also another method for us to save time. So this is the base painting, and our job today is just to add impasto on top of everything else. So we just make a new layer and then we can add our impasto here. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to go into the blending mode and switch it to overlay. Once you have switched it to overlay, go over to the colors and give it a normal black and white. So one black, one white. Pick black if it's a D, and then of course you pick white if it's an L brush. So now I'm in the L brush, and if I paint, look at what's happening. I'm actually adding textures already onto the face, and we can actually use this to save time. So to set this up properly, this overlay layer has to be 50%. I'm just still using the same brush here. So I'm just painting a slight texture all over her face. Maybe I follow the flow of the brushes a little bit. I can overlap them. You can change brushes, by the way. If you notice, when you press harder or press softer, the effect is slightly different. And you can see how quickly I can get this done. So this should always be your first step, this overlay layer, because you can just quickly add textures without compromising or without changing colors. There are of course additional techniques and tips when it comes to using this workflow, and I will get into that when we get into the more complex artworks later on. So this is also a great brush to add hairs because it just naturally gives the flow already. And there is a very quick way for us to add to the background as well. You can use the Easy Smooth Tick Paint. So using this brush, you see when I paint, I added like a streak here. But what I want is for this part to have the shadow color. So all I have to do is just switch to the dark one, and when I paint, it becomes like that instead. So it's the same. And how do we control the color of this part here? So this part here is actually black. So if I turn off the overlay, you can see that it's actually black. So which means that if this black, I move it lighter, it should be able to match the value of whatever's underneath. So if you're painting something light, use a lighter gray, and if you are painting over something very dark, you can continue to use this color. So for example, I can paint over this part and it will work because you see it matches the value. And if I want to paint over the background, I can just use gray, and then you see voila. So I can use this to quickly add, like, you know, a stroke here like that. It's so easy to just add textures onto your artwork by using this overlay mode. And this will be the mode that you love the most because it's the easiest workflow ever. Okay, so now let's say that your job is done and you have added the textures. Now it's time to fine-tune the textures. So we can see here is a mess. We can just use the eraser, load the fat spray brush. It's right at the bottom. And then we will just slightly erase over the textures. So now the face has a slight texture, and we will do the same for the hair. I didn't use this technique when I was creating this artwork, and I stumbled upon this workflow later on, which is one of the reasons why I took like 2 years to develop this brush pack. It's just so technical. So once you have erased, you should have something that is very subtle and it looks like this. And then from far, it just looks like it's painted. And this is an excellent base for you to go to your next step. Once you're done with your overlay layer, just name it overlay and then create a new layer on top. So you want your overlay layer to be like just at the bottom. So the easiest way for us to get started on this is to get started with the lining first. So for lining, we have 2 brushes that we can use. So that is the liner smooth tick paint. So if I use this and I paint, I get a line. And then I can also use the Streaky Smooth Tick Paint. The difference between these 2 brushes is this one has a lot of texture and it does not get as small as the other one. So like the other one can get a lot smaller, the liner can get really thin until you can't see it, and the other one is a bit thick. So depending on the size of your canvas, you just choose which one you want to use. So to get started with this brush is really easy. We just line the hair or anything you want to line in this artwork first. So we're going to focus mostly on the hair. So I'm just going to stick to the liner smooth paint. So I'm going to pick the yellow, get the same swatch from the history, and then slide diagonally for the shadow. So most of the time you'll be matching size. There you go. Then for the tip, you will want to fade that, and the way to do it is to get to the smudge tool and load the soft pull 3D smudge. It can stretch indefinitely. If you want it to, you can stretch it all the way up, but you just want it to fade, so you just fade it out. You can also do a bunch of cool things with it, like you can reshape it. It's like modeling within Procreate. Yeah. So I can always just clean up the sides. Okay, so now we have our first line. So like we can continue putting new lines. Okay, let's do this one. I'm gonna use the Streaky Smooth Thick Paint for now. And oh look, I already have a shadow that I can use. Remember we talked a lot about contrast in the previous tutorial, so make sure you take note of that. We want something that is very low contrast so that it doesn't take away from the pastel look of the artwork this time. So I made 2 strokes here. What we want is to join the strokes. So we can just use the smudge tool, the same smudge brush, and join it. Alright. So now we have 2 already, and we can continue to build the rest. Shadow color, main color, switch back to the shadow, line. For this one is so thin, I'm going to use the liner. Also my brushes worked better if you are slow. So if I do it fast, you can see that there's a lot of artifacts here. But if I do it slow, everything is smooth. Ooh, that's a juicy one. I love how juicy this came out. You can also start to add more definition to the hair just by using this liner brush. So I've added a couple of strokes here, and I can just fade out the ends so that they don't look so repetitive. Use the Streaky Smooth. These 2 brushes are like the best brushes for lining and for like foliage like grasses, you know. So for this edge, I don't have to erase it. I can just smudge it away using the same smudge. It's a good carving tool. Another thing that is very good with liners and the Streaky brush is the ear. So let's say I do this. So we will want to concentrate on the highlights. Just gonna swap to this, keep the shadow the same. So this is your first attempt at painting with the Impasto brushes, but this is usually as far as you go. You can't usually do any more than this. It's not easy to control. Okay, you can continue building the ear. Let me show you what I did previously. This is actually what I did before. The ear, I like to do a lot of definition in the highlights. So go on and line the whole artwork, and we'll move on to the next step. So once you are done with lining, you have already tried painting with the Impasto brushes. So let's talk about the Streaky Smooth Thick Paint again. If we paint, it looks like this, but if we stamp, it looks like this. So the difference is that this stamp has a lot more texture, right? So you can actually retain the texture and have a stroke as well if you use this smudge tool. So for the smudge tool, if you want to extend cleanly, you should use the basic one. You should adjust the size so that it matches first. Okay, look at how different the texture is. You can use the soft pull 3D smudge to clean up. There, clean up already. Or you can use the dry shaper 3D smudge to just fade out to a dry brush. So there's 3 3D smudges for you to experiment with, or you can just use a stamp. So like the hair, I can just add a stamp here. Just put the size to the biggest and stamp one time first. So I usually would move it to match the location, and then if the color is off, I would drop back the same main color. So now the color is correct. Then once I am done with this, I manipulate the shape of this stamp. So there's a few ways to manipulate it. You can smudge it. Smudge is the easiest. I'm using the soft wool right now. The bigger the size, the more you're smudging. So there we go, we have one impasto stroke already. So when we do this, bear in mind the base layer. So if the base layer fades before this, you've got to kind of match that as well. So you can use this technique, try out various brushes, and then do some matching here. My favorite brush to use is this, the round tip paint. Let me show you why. You can do so many things with it. Okay, so let's say I want to add slight texture to this background. So I'm just going to pick this color and then get the same swatch from the history, stamp it, bake. Okay, I always like to work bake. Then we can resize it. You see that it already has like a flow, so we want to match the flow to the brush stroke direction, and my brush stroke direction for this area is up. So I can just leave it like this, and then I'm going to use the soft core 3D smudge again and smudge out to match background. So look how natural is this. It's so natural and so easy to use. You can use it anywhere. I can use it here. Okay, get a new layer. So as I work, I like to merge my layers as I work. Okay, now I have this. I'm going to put it right here. Make sure the color is matching. Okay, it's matching now. Match the flow of the brush stroke, and I can start to smudge. There, see, it's so quick. You can use this brush like literally anywhere in the painting. You can also try other brushes. Usually I think that crowd favorites would be the squares. I discovered the round tip paint a bit later on, but people would usually stick to the squares. Squares are fun. It's just that this particular square has a lot of texture in it. Match the position, be careful of the underlying gradient, don't cover it. Once you have matched it, you can just smudge. And then there's your second impasto. So this is how you can continue to build stamps over your painting. But of course, the best stamp is usually those that you just put it there and do nothing. So for example, here, what I did was use this one. So when you move your stamp, you can see there's a variety of tools. You'll be using all of them. So I can flip it, match it here. Okay, match it. You can even distort it or warp it to match the area that you want to add the impasto. Then when you're done, just do your usual smudging. Maybe this one I'll use the dry shaper so that it has a nicer end. Okay, there, another stroke. For big areas like background, like for this painting, I see a lot of solid big blocks in the background, in the clothes. For these areas, you can use really big stamps, and that will really make the impasto stand out. So like for example here, I can use this square smooth thick paint. Test it. I think the shadow is not dark enough. Okay. This is good. Let's just fix the color a little bit. Okay, it's a very low contrast patch, which is fine. I'm just gonna position it. So I want this edge to be here, so I'm just gonna put it here. I want to warp it a bit. Okay, now's the time to smudge. There we go, we have one big stamp here already. And for these areas, I actually use the painting tool. So you can alternate different techniques, painting, stamping with smudge. Just play around and try to overlay all sorts. For the face, there are a couple of hotspots that you can add these stamps to. So usually, before I start adding stamps, usually I would create a new layer and sketch where I want the stamp to be. Like I want a proper big stamp here, one here, and then one big one here, maybe here, and then of course all the highlights has to have a stamp, and then I want a nice juicy stamp here, maybe a curve here. So I would actually just note down like where I want my stamps to be, like a whole map. Then I would go one by one and then just stamp all the way there. So like for this one, I would want a singular stamp that I do not edit. Pick a nice one. There we go. For the small parts, I usually use the streaky one or the round one. So I can actually use the same round tick pin that I love to modify with the smudge, if you remember. I can pick this and a strong red, and then I use this to create like the highlights like that. So you can just vary the size and the color as much as you like to get it to where you want it to be. And same goes for here, you can use the same technique, and also here as well. I also like to use this brush here to do this. Maybe just edit it a little bit. So build your artwork with the liners and the stamp, and then now we'll talk about the hair. For the hair, we can use long sweeping strokes if you like. You can just try various brushes and see which ones you like. Then as usual, you can always just edit the ends with the smudge tool to get it to flow. It's like sculpting wet paint. Okay, you can try different brushes. Because you already have a base already, so there is actually less work here. So there's another way of doing this. If you really want good quality strokes, this is how you get it. I'm gonna start right here with the blue. Get the dark blue. Make sure I'm on a new layer. So I stamp it. I have one swatch already. Okay, I want to really make sure that the color is accurate. Okay. So I have one stroke already. So the first thing to do is to match the shape of the impasto you're trying to create. I'm trying to create an impasto of this length. It's up to you. So let's say this is the impasto shape that you want to have. But the problem is the stroke is overlaying multiple colors. So this is how you do this. Make a few duplicates. Like 4, turn it off. Maybe the second one, you drop this light blue in, and then for the third one, you drop this yellow in. Okay. And for the last one, we drop the pink in. So now we have 4 colors: pink, yellow, light blue, and blue. So we start with the lightest one, which is yellow, and put everything else on top. Okay, so the way to edit this multicolor stroke is by erasing. So I'm going to start with the red. I'm going to erase the parts I don't want. This I'm still using the fat spray brush. Okay, then I'm going to do the light blue. So the light blue doesn't exist here. It also doesn't exist here. Okay. Then the dark blue, it doesn't exist except for the top. So if I turn on everything now, the yellow is right at the bottom. Okay, there we go. So I think I just gotta erase some of the yellow here. So now we have like a gradient stroke. So let's just merge all this. It's merged in one layer now. and we can edit like some effects here. So this is the way to create a really dynamic stroke that you can try. And now we have a really cool dynamic stem. So you can use this method if you want to create gradients with your impasto. Okay, now I'm going to go into the face for a few tips before I end this tutorial. For the rest, you can just experiment and stamp and have fun. Okay, so most importantly is you have fun. So for the face, the easy way to do it is to use the square stamp. Now what I like to do is to smudge away an L. So I leave one L and smudge away the other L. So we have texture, but it's not really disturbing the whole value. So it's really easy to add. I always just keep one edge and erase the other edge. I very rarely use like a pit. A pit means like two sides of texture. So for the face, it's safer to use techniques like this, like you just put in a stamp and you erase two edge or one edge, depending on how strong you want the texture to be. Like for here, I erased this part. Okay, so now let's recap what we learned today. The first workflow we learned was the overlay layer, where we just paint black and white and leave textures everywhere on the canvas. Then after that, we decrease their intensity to match whatever we have. Then after that, we learned how to use two brushes for lining, which is the liner smooth brush and the streaky brush. So we use that for lining for the hairs, which is very easy, and also to add like highlights in the eye or in the lips. Then after that, we learned all about stamp manipulation. So the stamp manipulation, we learned how to use the smudge tool to smudge the shape out first. Then after that, we also learned how to paint with the brushes. And finally, we used the free transform tool to change the shape of the stamp. We can distort it and warp it as well. And lastly, we learned a really cool tip on how to apply gradients to our stamped manipulation. So that's all for today. In the next tutorial, we have a more complex artwork that we are creating because it will focus a lot more on stamp manipulation to get really advanced effects. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye!